The Aryan Brotherhood of Virginia. Behind the razor wire and steel doors of Virginia's most secure prisons, a brotherhood thrives in the shadows, a violent, secretive fraternity bound by blood, ink, and ideology. This is the Aryan Brotherhood of Virginia. A prison gang forged in hate, hardened by violence, and sustained by loyalty to its own ruthless code. The Aryan Brotherhood of Virginia, often called the ABV, emerged in the 1990s as a regional offshoot of the notorious National Aryan Brotherhood. While sharing the same white supremacist ideology, this Virginia faction was not simply a carbon copy. They developed their own structure, rules, and operational style, adapting to the unique environment of the Virginia Department of Corrections. Inside facilities like Red Onion State Prison, Wallens Ridge, and Sussex Dwan, the ABV carved out a reputation for brutality. Members were known to target rivals without hesitation, whether black, Latino, or white inmates who defied their authority. Tattoos marked allegiance, lightning bolts, shamrocks, and the number 1488, symbols of white power and neo-Nazi beliefs. But ideology was only part of the story. The ABV operated as a criminal enterprise, controlling contraband tobacco, drugs, and extortion rackets. In the controlled chaos of prison life, their fearsome image was a weapon used to intimidate inmates and even corrupt staff into compliance. Membership was exclusive, often limited to white inmates with proven violent tendencies. Recruitment wasn't casual. It was a process. A prospect might be ordered to carry out an assault or even a murder to earn his patch. Once initiated, there was no walking away. Betrayal meant death. The gang's leadership operated with military-style discipline. Orders flowed down from a small council to lieutenants and soldiers, ensuring coordinated action across multiple prisons. This structure allowed the ABV to survive lockdowns, transfers, and segregation units, adapting and regrouping wherever members were placed. Law enforcement took notice. In the early 2000s, state and federal investigators launched joint operations to dismantle the gang's network. Wiretaps, informants, and undercover work exposed not only violent assaults inside prison walls, but also a surprising reach into communities outside. Some ABV members orchestrated drug deals and retaliatory hits from behind bars, using contraband cell phones and coded letters. The state's supermax facilities became both a weapon and a challenge. Isolating ABV leaders slowed some operations, but it also concentrated dangerous individuals together, giving them a secure breeding ground for recruitment and planning. Today, the Aryan Brotherhood of Virginia remains a priority target for DOC intelligence officers. Their numbers may be small compared to street gangs like the Bloods or Crips, but their capacity for extreme violence keeps them high on the threat matrix. In the battle for control behind the walls, the Aryan Brotherhood of Virginia stands as a reminder that some wars are fought in shadows, far from public view, but dangerously close to home. The Reckless Tigers of Virginia, based on verified reports and court findings. In the leafy suburbs of northern Virginia, far from the headlines, a ruthless street gang rose through the ranks, clever, violent, and brazenly entrepreneurial. This is the story of the Reckless Tigers, a group forged in youthful swagger and hardened by greed, trafficking drugs, terrorizing communities, and silencing anyone who dared to stand in their way. The Reckless Tigers trace their origins to Centerville, Virginia, around 2011. What began as small-time dealing among high school friends soon ballooned into one of the region's most sophisticated criminal enterprises. By recruiting teens to avoid detection, they distributed thousands of pounds of marijuana alongside cocaine, ecstasy, prescription drugs, and THC vape products to middle and high schoolers, college students, even younger selves of themselves. What set them apart was their reach, not just across state lines, but across generations. They ran a vertically integrated operation stretching from a cannabis farm in California to the suburbs of D.C. Their branding was purposeful: tiger logos on t-shirts and jewelry, house party promotions, social media bravado. But their empire was built on fear. Intimidation came in every form: Molotov cocktails hurled at houses, drive-by shootings, and vandalism that forced families to flee their homes. Then came the true horror: 2 murders. The first, in April 2016, unfolded at a gang house party. A guest argued with Tigers members, was stabbed in the chest, left bleeding. He returned home and died that night. The second killing, more calculated, struck deeper. In 2018, Brandon White, a victim of assault by a Tigers member over a drug debt, was subpoenaed to testify. The gang offered him money to keep silent, $8,000. When he refused, they abducted him from a Fairfax County mall in early 2019, drove him to Richmond, brutally stabbed, and shot him to death. By 2022, federal prosecutors closed the noose. 4 men, Peter Le, Young Yu, Joseph Lamburn, and Tony Lee, were convicted on charges ranging from racketeering and drug trafficking to kidnapping and murder. The trial exposed the gang's deep roots, their violence, reach, and audacity to tamper with justice even from behind bars. The reckless Tigers were more than street-level thugs. They were architects of a modern criminal franchise, rooted in youth, amplified by terror, and undone only by the persistence of those who refused to stay silent. Their legacy lingers, a cautionary tale in the suburbs. Where shadows lie, fear follows. And justice, however delayed, can still find its way. Insane gangster disciples of Virginia. In the underbelly of Virginia's prison system, alliances forged in violence ripple through corridors, echoing the legacy of one of the most complex factions in American gang history: the Insane Gangster Disciples, or IGD. The Insane Gangster Disciples, a splinter of the Gangster Disciples under the Folk Nation umbrella, emerged through a mixture of admiration and rebellion. Comprised in part of marginalized white inmates seeking power, identity, and belonging, the IGD adopted gang literature and symbolism: black attire, raiders gear, 6-pointed stars, pitchforks, devil hearts, echoing traditional GD iconography. Though their numbers in Virginia may not rival street-level Bloods or Crips, intelligence reports list IGD as active there. They operate in a dual realm, both incarcerated and on the streets, sometimes tolerated by mainstream GDs as auxiliary forces or auxiliary units, assisting with contraband trafficking or serving as proxies in violent acts. But this faction's reach goes far beyond mere aesthetics. In South Carolina, a state not so distant in influence, the IGD orchestrated brutal violence, kidnappings, murders, drug trafficking, and even witness intimidation, all managed by leaders wielding contraband cell phones behind bars. Their structure mirrored a criminal enterprise: set leaders, layers of command, unflinching loyalty enforced by deadly retribution. Though there's limited public reporting on specific IGD disruptions inside Virginia prisons, it's likely they mirror regional patterns: small cells of hardliners influencing younger inmates, moving contraband, and performing violent deeds at the behest of invisible leaders beyond the bars. To understand them is to grasp the paradox. Insane, not in madness, but in fervent loyalty, an identity born from emulating and distorting gangster lore. Reddit users note founders like Don Smokey and Solomon elaborating a mythology of militant enforcers acting independently of classic gangster disciple authority. Law enforcement views IGD as more than a fringe group. They are a glimpse of how prison cultures evolve, how ideology and criminal intent can become entwined where supervision and hierarchy meet desperation. The Insane Gangster Disciples of Virginia represent more than a subgroup. They reflect a broader story of adaptation, survival, and corruption behind bars. Their presence warns that even in confinement, networks thrive, and that the most dangerous power often wears the darkest symbols. United Blood Nation in Virginia, inspired by the gang's broader history and impact. Behind iron-barred gates and inside ramshackle cells, factions shift, alliances form, and one of the most resilient has made its mark even in the Commonwealth of Virginia. This is the story of the United Blood Nation, the East Coast Bloods, and their silent, looming presence in Virginia's correctional landscape. Founded in July 1993 on Rikers Island by incarcerated leaders Omar O.G. McPorty and Leonard Mackenzie, the United Blood Nation emerged as a reaction to survival, identity, and protection. Drawing on West Coast blood ideology, these incarcerated men ambitiously crafted a hierarchical criminal network that extended far beyond New York's iron walls. Their rapid expansion across the East Coast, through federal lockups and state prisons, turned the UBN into a dominant prison force. It outgrew rivals like the Crips, leveraging unity, brutal discipline, and ideological symbolism to maintain control. The UBN operates like a fraternally disciplined enterprise. Local sets follow the 31, a codified set of rules written by its founders. These rules demand loyalty, silence, and dues, shared locally but also funneled upwards to gang leadership, anchored in New York's prison system. Communication is painstakingly controlled. Coded letters known as kites, contraband cell phones, and even social media messages keep the network alive despite lockdowns. Visual symbols become silent language. Red graffiti with crossed-out C for Crip Killer, burn-scarred dog paws or paw dots, MOB tattoos, each a badge of belonging, defiance, and warning. In Virginia's prisons, the UBN may not be front-page news, but intelligence insights from DOC reports paint a clear picture. East Coast Bloods have repeatedly been identified behind bars, operating as both violent enforcers and contraband profiteers. Though their numbers here are eclipsed by more visible street gangs, even small footprints, especially linked to influential sets like the 9-Tray Gangsters, signal coordinated reach. Virginia law enforcement views UBN remnants as a red flag, a sign that prison walls cannot always contain organized crime. The gang's disciplined hierarchy, coded communication, and ruthless structure allow it to adapt, compete, and persist even behind layers of security. The United Blood Nation is more than a club of incarcerated men. It is a living enterprise, a prison legacy born in New York, but echoing through the East, penetrating Virginia's institutions. Their presence cautions us. Where loyalty backs legend and rules govern chaos, power doesn't vanish. It evolves and sometimes endures. MS-13 in Virginia. Beyond city limits and quiet suburban lawns lies a legacy of brutality that transcends borders. Enter Virginia's chapter of the Mara Salvatrucha, better known as MS-13. Here, its shadow stretches from violent street cliques into the very cells that confine it, woven into a broader story of terror, control, and systemic threat. MS-13, born in the late 1980s and early 1990s by Salvadoran immigrants in Los Angeles, quickly evolved into an international criminal enterprise, one renowned not just for crime, but for bone-chilling cruelty. Its presence in Virginia, though quieter than in East Coast strongholds, remains deeply entrenched and deeply violent. According to federal prosecutors, the gang's grip in Northern Virginia is real and ruthless. A Salvadoran national linked to MS-13's ULS clique, Elmer de Jesus Alascandre, received multiple life sentences for orchestrating a string of murders, including dismemberments, machete killings, and ambush-style executions around Reston. Another case reveals MS-13's reach extending into Virginia's prison system. In May 2025, at Wallens Ridge State Prison, corrections officers were the targets of a calculated assault. 5 were stabbed by inmates, the majority confirmed members of MS-13 from El Salvador, even though they were behind bars. The attack was premeditated, brutal, and underscored the gang's refusal to be silenced by fences or guards. State and federal responses have been aggressive. A coordinated task force in Northern Virginia places dismantling MS-13 at the forefront of its mission, recognizing the extent of its network and the urgency of its disruption. Virginia stands as both battleground and laboratory for the evolving threat of MS-13. From trafficking and targeted killings in suburban landscapes to orchestrated violence within prison walls, the gang exists as an unrelenting force, operating where confinement is meant to deter, not enable. In Virginia, MS-13 remains more than a name or a statistic. It's a living, violent instrument, one that ignores boundaries, penetrates institutions, and challenges the very notion of security. And until its sons of El Salvador are fully contained, its story will continue writing itself behind locked gates and beyond. The Latin Kings in Virginia, crafted using historical insight and investigative reporting from regional cases. In the hidden currents of Virginia's criminal underworld lies a legacy both storied and complex. The presence of the almighty Latin King and Queen Nation, more commonly known as the Latin Kings. Though often associated with Chicago or New York, their influence extends into Virginia's corridors of confinement and its shadowed neighborhoods. From its inception in the 1940s and 50s as a community empowerment group for Latinx youth, the gang evolved, shaped by its own written codes, La Literatura, or the Manifesto, a constitution of loyalty, hierarchy, and symbolism. Uniform names, king or queen, declare rank and devotion. Tribes branch the organization into localized cells marked by shared colors, black and gold, and crowned iconography. While public records spotlight Latin Kings' violent rackets in Maryland and Pennsylvania, where leaders like Eric Roman orchestrated arson, murder, and robberies in courtside conspiracy, Virginia remains a quiet frontier. Sparse in high-profile law enforcement action, yet ripe for episodic infiltration by itinerant sets crossing state lines or recruiting inside correctional facilities. In the prison ecosystem, where order fractures under power vacuums, the Latin Kings' appeal lies in structure. Their prayer, rituals, and enforcement, though largely undocumented in Virginia, offer a framework for survival, status, and coordination. Within walls, even whispers of the manifesto can ignite influence among vulnerable inmates craving identity. Outside prison walls, Virginia's Latin Kings network may remain small, yet its potential reach is tangible. Given the documented proximity of their operations in neighboring Maryland, it's plausible that mobile cells or ex-members drift into Virginia towns, bringing echoes of their manifesto, their discipline, and their demand for allegiance. In these margins, the forgotten streets, the prison yards margins, the Latin Kings persist. Not through the clamor of headlines, but through coded loyalty handed down across state lines, a mural of black and gold consciousness stamped in the corridors of power and fear. The Latin Kings of Virginia may not dominate the docket, but they exist in the interstices, adapting, infiltrating, enduring through symbols and silent oaths. Their story reminds us, gangs, like ink on stone, endure where shadows prevail and identity whispers across cell bars. Dead Man Incorporated. Deep in the whispers of prison corridors, echoes of organized loyalty and retaliatory violence have spread beyond Maryland's walls into the depths of Virginia's correctional system. Their name, it's spoken in hushed urgency and respect. Dead Man Incorporated, or DMI. Founded in 2000 inside the Maryland Department of Corrections by Perry Rourke, James Sweeney, and Brian Jordan, DMI was born out of racial marginalization and strategic alliance. Rourke, once rebuffed from the black guerrilla family due to race, secured permission to form a faction of white inmates tied to BGF as allies. Thus began DMI's paradoxical identity: white, yet closely aligned with one of the most powerful prison gangs of color. As DMI expanded, its organizational hierarchy became ruthless and disciplined. At the top sat supreme commanders, beneath them elders, then commanders, lieutenants, field generals, sergeants-at-arms, and finance officers, each tier enforcing orders across facilities. Their economy thrived on contraband, smuggled drugs, tobacco, cell phones, spread through prison networks, and financed through dues and hits for hire. In exchange for money or contraband, DMI carried out violent assaults and targeted killings, even against prison staff. In 2011, federal prosecutors indicted 22 members of DMI on charges of racketeering, murder, and drug trafficking. Perry Rourke, known as Supreme Commander, along with co-founder Sweeney, were eventually sentenced to life in prison. Beyond formal records, first-hand accounts uncover the gang's reputation in Virginia prisons. Striking from the shadows, DMI dominates as one of the main white prison gangs, per Reddit users familiar with the prison culture. Being from Virginia, these white boys will kill your ass. They run deep in Virginia prisons. They don't even tolerate the AB. Tattoos tell a hidden story, symbols of power and identity. Illuminati triangles, Grim Reapers, the motto, "Dead man till I die," pit bulls, diamonds, tousle within the ink, a silent code of allegiance and defiance. Their reach defies borders. DMI's influence traverses state lines. Known to operate in Maryland, Virginia, and even West Virginia, the network adapts, exerting control whether behind the walls or back on the streets. Dead Man Incorporated is not a relic. It is a living testament to prison adaptation, born in a denied alliance, disciplined through hierarchy, kept alive through violence, loyalty, and symbols. In Virginia, they are not merely a ghost of Maryland's system, they are an active, enduring force. And wherever they go, the rules don't change, they evolve.